Hi guys, it's Lynn at Mutiny Ranch, and today I wanted to show you a simple sourdough bread recipe that I guess you could call like a lazy man's sourdough or no knead sourdough. And the reason I want to do this is because last night I taught one of my sourdough classes on how to create a starter and then bake your first loaf. And it never fails. This is, I think, the fourth time I've taught this class. It never fails that at some point the students, their eyes start to glaze over as they hear things like having to feed your starter the night before you're going to start your dough, and then kind of babysitting the dough throughout the following day. So as you auto lees and then start to do your stretch and folds, and that you need to do your stretch and folds, something like every hour for 3 to 4 hours, followed by the bulk fermentation. And you just kind of see this look going from being hopeful that they're going to learn how to bake their first sourdough bread to kind of like, oh my God, what did I just get into? This is going to be a 2-day process, and I'm not going to be able to do anything else but watch my dough. So after watching a bunch of videos, doing some reading and research, and then my own experiments, I think I have a nice way of making a bread that's pretty much hands-off. Just the initial preparation of the dough will require some handwork, and then not until you shape it do you need to touch the dough again. And once I shared that with the class last night, there was definitely a shift in perspective. People felt like they could really do this. I had brought in 2 identical loaves that I baked, but one was done a traditional way with stretch and folds, and then one was done with this method, kind of this lazy person's way or casual method of no knead sourdough. We put them side by side, cut them open, and then everybody sampled them. And a couple of people could sense a slightly more tart or sour part of the sourdough in the lazy method. Some couldn't tell at all. The stretch and fold one had a little bit smoother texture to the crust, and it rose slightly more, but we all kind of agreed that for the amount of effort that it took, the difference wasn't enough to justify the time spent doing all those stretch and folds and kind of being tied to the kitchen. So I want to show you this method here from start to finish, and then you can try it yourself, see which one you like. You could take whatever your favorite sourdough formula is and do a side-by-side comparison yourself. But hopefully this helps save you some time and some frustration or fear of trying to do a sourdough bread because of the time commitment. And let's get started. One of the biggest changes with this recipe is that we are going to start with a cold, unfed starter. So directly out of the fridge. You can see here this one was last fed on the 21st. Today is the 23rd. It would be fine to use one that hasn't been fed in a couple of weeks even. If it has a little hooch on top, pour it off or mix it up. But so unfed starter, and that's probably going to blow some people's minds because we're always told that we want to have a very active starter when we're starting our dough. So we're already breaking all the rules with our starter, but just stick with me. So we're going to start off with 126 grams of our cold, unfed starter. To this, we're going to add 506 grams of water. Mine is room temperature water. So 506 grams of water. And we'll give this a little stir. That starter is cold, so it may not dissolve like it normally does when we start our dough with a well-fed starter. But just do the best that you can, kind of break it up and loosen it up. And now the other rule we're going to break is that we're going to go ahead and add our salt. And for this, it'll be 19 grams. I'm going to use fine gray salt and 19 grams. And I add it here because I want that salt to dissolve in the water so that it's not, it doesn't kind of get stuck and concentrated in one part of the dough. And for mine, I'm just keeping it really simple by using all-purpose local white flour. And like I said, just keeping it really simple so that we have positive results. So 704 grams of an all-purpose flour. And then we're going to mix this well. So basically, starting off with everything in the recipe in the bowl together. So this recipe, I think, is about 74% hydration. And then we really want to make sure that everything's incorporated because we are not going to do any stretch and folds. So this is where you may want to use your hand or a stand mixer and just for a few minutes do a little bit of kneading. I like to do it just in the bowl so I don't have anything else to clean up. So this is truly a lazy person's method of baking bread. If you don't like the dough sticking to your fingers, I always recommend dampening your hands instead of adding flour. We don't want to change the hydration level of this dough. Adding flour will potentially decrease the hydration and you'll end up with a denser loaf of bread. But just dampening your fingers shouldn't add too much moisture, but it'll keep the dough from sticking to your hands. So really this is by feel. When you feel like you've kneaded this enough and that the dough is kind of starting to form a cohesive ball, then you're done. Because we don't want this to dry out. This is going to sit on the counter for approximately 12 hours. We don't want this to dry out at all and get a crust on top. So what I like to do is just use a large plastic bag. This one just happens to be an old rice bag. And slide that bowl right inside. You could use plastic wrap or you could dampen a towel and place that on top. The idea is just to try not to let the top of the dough form a crust and dry out. And this is just going to sit at room temperature for approximately 12 hours and we'll do some shaping. All right, so it's been 12 hours this dough's been fermenting. So I'm going to go ahead and take it out of the bag and we'll take a look at it. Ideally, this dough will have maybe doubled in size. As I poke it, I can feel how elastic it is and it's nice and airy. You might be able to see the kind of air pockets through the glass here on the side. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it out on the counter. You can see those nice gluten strands here. So just carefully turning out, trying not to deflate it too much. And then I'm going to shape it kind of in real time. So I have moist hands or wet hands. And I'm going to carefully just stretch my dough a little bit. Like I said, just being careful not to deflate it too much. And then I like to kind of lace it up. Just pulling a little piece of dough from each side till I reach the bottom. And then I'm going to roll it and create like a nice little ball. You'll notice my counter is dry. There's no flour on it whatsoever, so I don't want to change that hydration. And the dry counter allows there to be like a tension built. So as I drag this dough, it creates almost like a skin on top. So a nice smooth skin or surface, and that's created by this dry counter and just using my hands to drag the dough a little bit. You might be able to see like the smoothness of the top of the dough and maybe the gluten strands kind of lining up. I'm going to get my banneton ready. If you don't have a banneton, you can use just a regular bowl and either flour it. I use rice flour, or you could place a dish towel, like a non-terry cloth towel inside as a liner, and then dust that with rice flour very well. Corn flour works pretty well too. Both of those are great because they don't get sticky from the moisture of your bread dough. I'm going to also flour the top of the dough just to make sure I got it all, and then I'm going to carefully place it in the banneton, smooth side down, and just for good measure, a little bit more rice flour. And I just use rice that I have on the shelf, and I put it in my blender and create my own rice flour, so it's very, very inexpensive. Now I'm going to just place this dough right back in the same plastic bag that I've been using. Just so it doesn't dry out, because it's now going to go into the refrigerator for 12 more hours. And the refrigerator, the coldness in there allows the fermentation to continue, but it slows it down a lot. And so it goes in for 12 hours. The dough will firm up, be much easier to handle. And this buys me time so I don't have to bake till the morning. All right, it's been another 12 hours. It's next morning. So my oven preheated to about 500 degrees, and my Dutch oven is already in there too. So it is preheating with the oven, and we just need to transfer this dough into that Dutch oven. So here is my dough. I'm just going to score this, just a quick scoring, and then it's going directly into the hot Dutch oven very carefully. Even though the cover is going to help retain some steam, I like to douse my bread with a little bit of water. And then we'll cover this back up to hold that steam in, just like we would with any other sourdough. And we'll pop this cold dough straight into the oven. And that will go in for 25 minutes. And we'll check on it in a few. All right, let's pull this loaf out. It's been 25 minutes covered. And it looks pretty nice. It had a nice oven spring to it. Hopefully you can see that. We're going to pop it back in the oven, lower the temperature a little bit. Probably give it another 15-20 minutes to brown up and make a nice little crust on there. All right, we're going to pull our loaf out of the oven. And here we go. So that's a nice golden crust there. Of course, just like any sourdough, you could bake this a little bit longer if you like a darker crust. But this is looking really nice. Let's pull it out very carefully. And there we have it, our lazy sourdough. It rose decently. It looks pretty nice. Sounds pretty nice. We're gonna let this cool, probably at least for an hour, if not longer, and then we'll slice it open and check out the crumb. All right, here's our lazy loaf the next day. As you can see, it was a big hit, so half of it's almost gone now, but it seems to have held up really well overnight, just wrapped in a dish towel. It is a really tasty loaf. Definitely for the amount of effort, I'm very pleased with this loaf, and think that if you are short on time, this is a really great method. You might sacrifice a little bit of texture, a little bit of smoothness on the actual crust, But I'd say that's fairly minor when you cut out, the babysitting that normally has to be done for sourdough. So I hope you try it out. Let me know. It should work with pretty much any formula of sourdough. So I just gave one example of the bread that I like to use. But if you have a formula that you prefer or different hydration, try that out. Just use the same method. Leave me a comment below and let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear about that. And I'm on Instagram as well under Tales from the Mutiny. And if you bake a loaf like this, I would love for you to tag me in your photo so I can check it out and see your success stories. All right, you guys take care, and we'll talk to you soon.